some of the funds that are facing Africa right now are $2 billion. The EarlyBird can change companies, 2,000% this year. How are you accelerating your talent to be able to play at a global scale?
Hello and welcome to the Member Spotlight podcast. My name is Michelle Jerry. I'm the Asset Communications Officer. Today we get a chance to speak to Peter Ngunyi, the CEO and founder of EarlyBird, as he tells us about his legacy, what inspired the creation of EarlyBird, and his vision for the African ecosystem. Stay tuned.
So I'm Peter Ngunyi.
Okay.
I'm a farmer's kid. I grew up in Kajiado. And I'm what people call Masai Angwashe. So I'm a Kikuyu who grew up in Masai land. And and that's important to me because I actually was brought up in a way where I lived half my life in the city and the other half really in rural areas. My classes when I was in standard 5 and 6, half of us didn't have shoes. I went to a school where English was taught in Kikuyu, and I learned all my Kikuyu from a girl named Ngunyi. That's how interesting that particular time was in Masai land. So I grew up with everyone, doing different kinds of things. I was lucky enough, I started business when I was 14, and my father, you had to work for him for 2 years before he would pay for college. So I found myself in River Road, Grogon, Nyamakema, so you farmed half your time and you ran businesses the other half of the time. I went to the US and I spent a lot of time there. And I was privileged enough, I was lucky, I think, to have done some strategy work. Then I started a company that grew. Then the Great Recession happened back when, which led to a few events which led me back home. And I'm very happy I came back home. Spent 2 years at Brick. Brick is a tech company in Nairobi. 2018 Time Magazine top 50 most genius companies in the world. And when I was there is when I kind of realized that there's a lot that could be done in the kind of like venture and venture space. And that's how I find myself here. That's who I am. I spend a lot of time outdoors, hiking, camping, travel a lot. I think a huge part of traveling is getting to know what other people are doing around the world. It minimizes we know better because we are from somewhere else. It helps tell our story better, especially if we are gonna start growing companies that are not only African but Pan-African, and hopefully someday we'll have a lot of companies that don't only work in Africa, they work everywhere. Facebook comes here, we need to start exporting some things out there. I am an activist in the way I work and live, and it's because I am at an age somewhere where legacy is really important, right? So if you look at the equator, 2/3 of Kenya is above the equator. Most people don't know that. And above that, most of the time when you're told about Turkana, you're told what? Shifters and war and desert, But that's not what you find when you go there. It's narratives that are ingrained from colonial days, and the same reasons why sometimes we're told, African entrepreneurs cannot do X, Y, Z, now we do take a lot of money from all over the world. We need to respect that. However, there is a line that you need to draw when that money starts becoming bad for you. Yeah, so spend most of my time, like you, questioning things, but from a very experiential type stuff. If there was brain surgery being done somewhere, I probably want to be in the room, not watch it from afar. So I'm spending a lot of time just doing things, planting, painting, whatever it is, just so that I can have it from an experiential perspective, which means I'm spending very little time here. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Do you think this in a way affected how you setting up EarlyBird?
So EarlyBird was a process. My time at Brick was amazing.
Yeah.
I got to be around iLab and iHub and be around 50 of the top companies in East Africa and play around with all those entrepreneurs. It was, I think, when iHub moved, it deflated a lot of things. Because as the president of Brick, I could leave my company and just walk 2 floors over and find somebody else. We are struggling with this thing, can you help? The ecosystem was really, really strong. I think we're stronger now because people have figured out how to work outside. I think that was like a mother, right? So people have figured out, However, something that wasn't figured out until, and I don't know whether we figured out yet, is the path of money in Africa, right? Every year, we almost double the investments that come into the continent, right? In 2016, I think it was, not even $500 million. Then it went to $1 billion. I think 2020, even with Corona, we got over $2 billion into Africa as investments. Now, $2 billion is a lot of money. Compared to other continents, not too much, but it's a lot of money.
Okay.
However, if this money isn't finding good companies, we'll still keep failing, and people will say this is why Africa does not work, right? And for me, I like there are narratives that I'm like, okay, no. I went to the US, I've been to other countries. If you look right now, the smartest people, if you go to any office, Goldman Sachs, go to KPMG, go to anywhere, Toronto, New York, Boston, London, you'll find amazing Africans. So it's not that we are not smart enough. It's just maybe there's brain drain, some of it left, and maybe because we didn't go to some certain schools and all of that, the money doesn't find all the companies that I would like for the money to find. So I was like, okay, I'm getting to a place in my life where I can afford to live a decent life even by supporting other people, right? So why not? Actually, I remember that the year after I left Brick, I spent a lot of time at Sunculp. I spent a lot of time meeting many people. I'm like, okay, if nobody's gonna do this, then I have to, So I remember calling, some of the early people I was calling back then were the, Estandetti, Patrick Karanja was at Rockefeller, Yavka. So they're different people, and I think these are the kind of friends who you don't want at that point, because you're like, should I do this? They're like, yes, do this. In another world, they'll make it, no, Peter, it's too hard, too difficult. Park your brain somewhere, get paid, and so that's how EarlyBird started. It just started because I thought at that point somebody needed to do something. Then there was the minute I said I was doing that.
This was like 10 years ago.
No, EarlyBird is a 3-year-old company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. There was a session that was done at Sunculp that says impact investors trying hard enough to invest in Africa. And I somehow became one of the panelists for that. And I remember by the end of the session, like it was standing room only. I've never seen anything like it at Sankal. I think almost a fight broke out. Yeah. Like holy cow. There are a lot of people who are passionate about certain things, and maybe we need to create system and structures. And actually, that's why I like ASEC, because ASEC came to kind of create system and structures for a larger group of people to say something, right? Because what I'm saying right now, if I say it as one person, he's a disgruntled person. If the whole ecosystem says we have to do better, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, now that we agree that we have to do better, how can we do better? What are the structures that can be created, if you're a structure person, to do better? Yeah.
Do you think that conversation is being had by the right people? How can we do better? I think I background this on, I remember, I think sometime last year we had a conversation on sustainability. And it was like, how can we bring it home? How can we not, Jack Ma is not giving us money, World Bank is not giving us money. So where's the money here?
And actually what most people are saying, including myself, the more I have that conversation, the less money I get. Yeah, right? Because people are afraid of speaking truth to power. Yeah. If all the money coming into the continent, not all, but a lot of it comes through the same people, they're like, okay, Peter is problematic. Yeah. So stay away from him. So a lot of people, for the sake of self-preservation, are not having that conversation. However, that conversation needs to be had for several reasons. One, we need our own money. So you're right. And that was actually a non-starter until 2019. So this is what happened. I went to Lenana, and one of our older brothers from there is a tax advisor for many people, So invite him to talk to us, and he's like, listen, these are all the different ways you can invest. But for the last 40 years, real estate has outperformed anything, so please, after 2 hours of conversation, just buy more houses and land. That's the problem that has been Kenya. Yeah. Now, fortunately, and this is unfortunate for a lot of people, fortunately, the class asset called real estate is no longer as strong as it used to be. So now people are getting out of kind of like the rabbit hole and saying, okay, what else is there to be found? Then you find, oh man, there are a lot of companies out here that could benefit from angel investments, private equity, venture capital. So now you're starting to see a lot more venture capital from in-continent, a lot of private equity in-continent. Actually, some of the respected names are actually money from here. Yeah. You might not know it, but some of the richer families have all got like venture funds within themselves. Now we have two advantages. You have that asset class that's now opening up, and two, you have exits. You're still people who put in money in Twiga earlier getting out, people who put in money in Paystack or whatever it is, and people are like, whoa, you mean I actually can make money by backing some of these companies? I think that is where we need to have those conversations. Conversations in a way that people won't be punished for having the conversations. And that, again, that's where an asset comes in. I think the first time we talked, this was the call on the phone, right? It was like, I want to be a member of a club that actually addresses certain things. The second thing is, we've had an ecosystem where people keep each other out. I'll give you a good example. Back again when I was starting EarlyBird, I go to a conference that actually this was the YAFCA conference. Esther kindly invited me. I was really having a good time. But then there was this session that people were talking about African entrepreneurs are not doing this, right? Actually, this wasn't her session, it was somebody else's session, a whole completely different conference. They're like, African entrepreneurs are not doing impact measurements this way, they're not doing documentation this way, the entrepreneurs don't know these things. raised up my hand. I'm like, how many entrepreneurs are here? There were 2. At this point, I was still a Greek. It was me and somebody else. I'm like, if you have this conversation in silos, none of the entrepreneurs know that you're having problems, but the ticket to get into this conference is $2,500. That is a whole Kenyan household salary for the year. They're never gonna be here. So you either sponsor people for them to be here, or you go and find them, because even the results of that conversation was like, okay, we need to bring more people from Oxford because they're the ones who do this, so that they can go and we can embed them into the companies. I'm like, yes, that will work, but it won't solve the problem. So you will solve the M&E part that you were trying to do, but unless you can create a system where companies can learn from day one how to do it themselves, flying in more consultants from out there because you're a rich law firm or you're a rich venture capital did not solve that problem. So we all need to be a part of an ecosystem that is inclusive. And that's why when I called you, I said, listen, I've paid my subs, but if the subs say that I am the only one who's going to be in here, then we'll just end up being another bubble. A different way where you're inclusive. Because I think the idea here is to get the continent, not even Kenya or East Africa, to get the continent competitive, to get our companies competitive, to get money to the right entrepreneurs. Here's the crazy thing. If you look at year 10 of companies, who's exiting? Where are those companies we invested in 10 years ago? Solar companies, briquette companies, driving companies, all those entrepreneurs left the continent. So you need to start investing on year 1 in more of the people who are going to be here on year 10. And that's something that we have to continue, like pushing ourselves. It is not easy because that person has not gone to Stanford, he's not gone to Oxford, she's not speaking the language. I speak the language, that's why I started Alibaba. When I talk to an investor and I don't know there's good language, like, I'll circle back to you. We are thinking about that problem. In fact, a guy from UN, we'd go to Innovation Week all the time. What do you think about this? I don't know, right? It's 2 different words. They say the exact same thing, but it's kind of like, okay, you're part of the system that speaks a certain way, So what 2020 taught us, Black Lives Matter and other things, is we have to loan our privilege to other people. If you have access to the TV world, if you have access to PR, how can you loan that to a company that is African leaders, female founded, whatever that, person who needs pushed forward. And that's what I think we're doing. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really, really something. And I think just speaking on the funding bit and people being afraid to have very honest conversations because they feel locked out. I don't know if you'd be comfortable just overviewing how you source funding to do the work that you do.
Okay, that is a good question. So, originally, I wanted to raise all, friends and family funds. Then the asset class we call real estate did whatever it did, and I was like, okay, you'll be throwing good money after bad money. I mean, the function of it wasn't there. Then, based on a couple of conversations, I realized that creating a full fund, most of the time in Kenya, it takes 48 months. Most people tell you 18 months, but the reality is, I was like, okay, do I have 3 years to wait till we can start deploying money? Like, no. Okay, so what do? I'm like, okay, I still have access to these entrepreneurs. I have access to a little bit of my own capital, so EarlyBird capital, but there's still a lot of money out there that is not finding a home. And that's something most people do not realize. There is a lot of money that can't find a home.
But why? why can't it find a home? Because people are looking. People are really. You meet somebody and they're like, oh, why don't you think we can? Why do you think we do not have unicorns in Kenya, in Africa?
Yeah.
And the very low level is like, oh, there's no money. No one is putting money in this.
Yes.
No one is. But then you say there is money out there.
So
how do we tap into that?
Before how we tap, let's figure out why it's not big.
Yeah, why is it?
Yeah. So I'd say three things. One is our companies are very small, right? And it's not because we deliberately create small companies, it's because sometimes we don't know that we need to create bigger companies, right? Just off the bat, you as an entrepreneur, myself, when I'm creating, because as a venture lab, there are companies that we are creating internally. It needs to be something that is attractive from even a global perspective. Now, not necessarily a unicorn, but it has to be attractive. So when people are looking for impact, somebody says, I created a company that is going to educate 30 girls. Everyone will come for you. But the person who's doing an education program at a fancy foundation is looking for something that will impact 3 million people. So from the design phase itself, we are failing because we are not looking at things big enough. That's from our end. From the other end, it's failed because they create funds that are too big for Africa. I'll give you a good example. Some of the funds that are facing Africa right now are $2 billion. The minimum check they can write is $15 million. So if we have an entrepreneur here looking for $50,000, I mean, there are many multiples away from ever getting that money, right? So are we creating companies that face that, and is the money facing us gonna be smarter and say, okay, maybe we need to create 50 million funds instead of 2 billion funds, right? The third is just language. We've just talked about that, you know. So when it comes, language networks privilege, right? I will close more deals in Watamu than I will in Nairobi, because some of the people who will be writing those checks will be on vacation in Watamu, will have a beer together, and that's how deals are done. And that is not Africa, that is everywhere, right? I have a good friend who's a member of Capital Club, and he was like, I can't find entrepreneurs. I'm like, can they get into Capital Club? No. Okay, you'll never find them. So you either find me and I can introduce you to them, or you need to leave. Actually, you need to leave where you're going to find, you know, because your friends, you know, if I'm at Mudaiga Capital, Vet, whatever, there is a kind of entrepreneur that I'll meet there and we'll do business together. But that entrepreneur is really not looking for, you know, 300K. You know, that's a whole different kind. So you need to plug into people where they are. You know, and some of the interesting spaces that are actually very lonely are our innovations. You know, so Mombasa will have an innovation week, Kisumu will have an innovation week, you know, Nairobi University will do, UN will do their innovation week, but are we coming ready to, you know, write checks of 100K? Most investors really, most of them, their minimum check size is 10M. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So those are the three top reasons why money is not finding a home. Like someone I respect a lot, like Sabu Shuru, they're like, okay, if your hub is not doing this one thing, getting money into a company, the rest everyone can do. You know, all this cohort stuff, all this, like, I'm gonna teach you how to do business model, canvas, whatever, right? We are gonna get to this part, but the way we look at companies as EarlyBird is, do you have a team and traction? I am not gonna come and hold your hand from point zero. The good thing about East Africa as an ecosystem, there is help for everyone. Right? So if you need to, from scratch, be taught what's a P&L and what's, you know, there's somebody for that. And I try to work with as many people. But really for EarlyBird, you look for teams that have, companies that have a team that you're proud of. Like these guys you're proud of. And traction, right? Traction means the market has decided what you're offering it, they want, right? Yeah. If you're doing yellow shoes and everybody wants red shoes, it won't work. If you're doing yellow shoes and everybody wants yellow shoes, and you can say, okay, you know what? We had 10 mic in sales last year. Now that, and I'm like you, I really like companies in that nascent stage, like that early chaotic stage, because that's where most of my experience has been, right? Once you start getting to 100 employees, not my, however, it also can't be at just an employee with an idea and stuff, because it takes most people here even like 18 months just to figure out, how to get themselves to a point of kind of like, anyway, that's.
So what's Alibaba's X factor? Like what's the one thing that you're like, this is the one thing we offer that you're fine, you can go anywhere else, but this is the thing that we bring to the table that we're super confident you can only get from us?
No, I don't think there's something that you can only get from us. I think our network is really strong and trust, right? So if I call an investor in France or in the US or in Japan and say, you know what, I really want you to talk to Brenda because I think she's brilliant. I think that is something that really means something. And that takes a contract from everyone. It takes a contract from the investors. It takes a contract from the entrepreneur that you're going to provide a return or try. Nobody can promise anything. It needs a contract from me that I'm just not going to push anything upstream, right, or downstream, right? So networks are pretty much in this world.
Your net worth.
Your net worth, yes. So Alibaba does two things. We do growth strategy and funding interventions, right? So growth strategy says we can get companies where they have really, really gangster traction, growth. And funding interventions meaning, you, me, the ecosystem, the universe will stand behind you. Something people don't acknowledge often is companies are made, not, that happens. If you look at, these are the top 10 companies that you should be looking at in Africa in 2021. These are, look at who's behind. Very few people are just kind of like, I by myself did this. Growing companies is like raising a child. You need a lot of things to go right and a lot of people to kind of endorse you. And it does take a little while to get there, but once you have that network traction, more than even raising traction, the network traction, I think at that point it's very hard for you to fail.
So in the last 3 years, how many startups have you supported?
A lot.
Do you have a number?
500. Yeah. So it's reducing very fast. Yeah. Because high numbers are generally, most people with high numbers have high numbers and they will admit this because of the money that faces them. So if I raise money to accelerate companies, I'll need to do a lot. Otherwise, we don't meet the M&E. We keep saying we are low number continent, right? So most people will have high numbers because you need high numbers. I've stopped doing high numbers because I want to see quality instead of quantity. Yeah. So we run a program once a year called Office Hours, and it's a peer-to-peer platform. So we say, okay, these are the 10 to 15 companies that we really, really like this year. And then we do several things. One, we create create space for them all to be in the same room, right? And we create space for them to discuss what's giving them a hard time. What you'll figure out, most of the time, smart companies don't need somebody else from out there to come and tell them something. They are all solving problems. It's just they solve problems at different times, and they can help each other a lot. But to support them in a higher way, we then bring people who've been way ahead of them. These are people who have led VC, PE companies, and then they get to learn from people who've really been in the system. Most of these people are men and women who've created companies in Africa. They're Africans. They speak their language. I found that very interesting when I was doing some work with Meta, who I work with a lot. And I'd come so I teach a lot of webinars and seminars, and, as a storyteller, I am in front of. But at the end of most of those, they were like, okay, you've told me about Facebook and you've told me about Airbnb. Tell me about somebody here. So we've had to pivot our success stories and our heroes and our mentors to be people who look like, because that's what people are asking for. It's kind of, okay, we know that person can make it there, but give me somebody who's made it here, somebody who's walked my road, somebody who went to the same schools as me, somebody who's had the same troubles raising money. Then I can start seeing myself go there. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing that, that particular program, I love running every year, these are really good, really strong entrepreneurs. Two of them graduated Y Combinator last year, so I don't need to do a Y Combinator program when they can do that, combined, my companies raised millions of dollars. Employment, you just get out of that, and if everybody employs 10, 15, 20 people this year, and you have 10 companies, then you've just put 200, high quality jobs into the market. We are really, really, really big on having a gender lens, because there are a lot of programs for female founders. I think we fail our female founders if we keep giving them programs and no money, right? So you keep going into another program and another program and another program, and keep saying, you guys are really good. So other things that I do that not necessarily shout about is we are advisors to a few funds on how they should look at Africa. Some from Europe, some from the US, and a lot of them sitting here. So that's a conversation we have a lot. It's kind of like, okay, show me what your portfolio is doing for female founders. I think that's important. Yeah.
Awesome, that's really amazing. I like that, the gender lens. I think it's something, we're working on something along those lines, and identifying women who, of course, support, but just who can have that conversation. So really, really happy to hear that you're doing that.
The conversation should be had by women.
Yeah.
I can only point a torch.
Yeah.
But I think there are enough smart people in the ecosystem and stuff.
Yeah.
Another thing that I should have mentioned earlier that is really exciting is 5 years ago when I came back to the continent, most of your funds sitting here had, really good people, but all foreigners. Like if you went into an office, it was all foreigners. But now if you go to most of the home offices here, they're being led and, by, Africans. That helps us kind of make the right decisions. It means we are, and that is really, really exciting. That is something that I'm really, really happy about.
Yeah, I mean that's the other point of why are there so many non-locals?
I actually wanted them to be more.
Yeah, we want them to be more. We want more locals. Is that what you're saying?
No, I want more of everyone. Because when I go to Facebook and I walk into the office, so I've been to Facebook, I've been to Google, I've been to Microsoft. Like when you walk to this office, they are like people from all over the place, right? Yeah. But I want to be able to be credible enough to lead, right? I want to feel included. I want the team to feel that there are no hierarchies, right? Okay, so yes, your team is diverse, but when I look into the salaries, these people get paid more, the women get paid less, whatever it is, right? We are trying to have that conversation as an ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I think ASEC is trying to have it. I think how it needs to be had is do we have the best person seated on that seat? Mm-hmm. Period. Do we have the best person seated there? And did we come up with this by having exhausted looking here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I know a lot of people, I swear, there are a lot of people sitting in London who would love to be home.
We would love them to be here.
There you go. So there has to be a different way. We have to make it attractive. I think, okay, I'm going to stop.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead. Okay.
No.
So 500 startups later.
Yeah.
What's the top 3 challenges startups face?
I think the first one I would look for somebody who looks for big companies like I do is Africa is such a fragmented market. So if I start a company here, then I'm going to Nigeria, my licensing is different, my employee hiring, my salaries are different, my access to taxation, it's all different. So I'm really excited about these free trade agreements that are coming up for regions all of Africa. That way we can do what India, China, and Europe. You start a company and you're not worried that if tomorrow you hire 10 people in a different country, you'll have to spend 3 months just trying to figure out what registration looks like. That's, I think, the big one. Again, if I'm looking at this from the perspective of EarlyBird companies, not just any other companies, right? The second one, I think, would be, funding. I think when you look at people who call me or who call accelerators, incubators, whatever, the number one reason they pick up that call is to access to cash, right? So, and I tell people this, so if you have a program that says, okay, this program is going to accelerate you, they didn't call for acceleration. Most people say that. They'll be like, okay, we looked at your company is not ready for an investment yet, so we would like for you to go into this program. When the program is done, how well are we doing at creating funding for companies? That's including, we are not doing, I think the ecosystem can do better in being able to fund the companies. Thirdly, I think it becomes a toss-up between kind of talent. How are you accelerating your talent to be able to play at a global scale? And is that talent inclusive? I think those go hand in hand. When I was at Brick, I was really excited about that team. People from all kinds of religions, ages. It's the first time I felt proud this team is super inclusive, including I would get called out on many things, right? Yeah. When you have people who don't necessarily have your approach, right? Mm-hmm. Peter, it's great that you like being out there in the bundles and stuff with your boys, but that's not us, right? So maybe I need to start doing other things that are more inclusive to people who want to watch TV over the weekend and docu-series and stuff, right? One of our engineers was an incredible DJ, so we created situations for them to DJ for the company in other places, so it just pushes you to stop looking at things in a bubble.
Awesome. Like for me, looking at the next 10 years for the ecosystem, and I feel like I'm now trying to look at the ecosystem as the regional ecosystem, as the African ecosystem. What does that look like? What is the future for startups in Africa?
There is I'll share an article. It's called "The Chicken and the Exit." It was you are reading that, right? I think it's an article that just shows where Africa is compared to the West. They didn't have as many exits a long time ago, and it tells this story from a perspective of when people were investing a lot in whaling expeditions back way when. So you invested in a ship, in a captain, they went to look for whales. Most of them didn't succeed, and I think they got better and better, and Africa is actually getting better and better. You're starting to see really strong exits. You're starting to see IPOs. So you're starting to see more trust in that if I put money in Africa, you're gonna get money out. You're starting to see the periods of exit move from 15 years to 10 to 7. So you're seeing a lot of things. Now, I always tell this story from just being an old guy. In 93, Kenya had almost 100% inflation, right? Most people are leaving the continent. It was really, really bad. And at that time, Nigeria, everyone, it was crap, right? There was literally no Runda. There was no, you had, village market, you had, and Sarit. Everything else this was just government houses, it was just crap. But when you see where Kenya is right now, the kinds of amenities, I wake up and go to spin class. Who does that? Right? There's enough yoga, there's a restaurant for anything you want. That's where we are right now, compared to a point where the only restaurants in Kenya that you could go to were Wimpy, right? Nobody could afford anything else. Now you can have a steak restaurant, we have a Peruvian Japanese restaurant. That's where your money is right now.
Mexican.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I have to ask myself, when I am in Hong Kong or London, somebody created that. That was never there 100. They've taken time, but somebody created that. So do I want to be a creator, or do I want to be one of those people who waits and comes back and finds everything is nice and creative? I look at this from the point when I was in the United States. Any company I worked for, I only changed it 0.0001%. But EarlyBird can change companies, 2,000% this year. We can move the needle. We can create cities. We are creating highways. So you either want to be a part of that, and you're going to be rewarded for being a part of that. If you watch docus like the people who created America, right? Those were 5 people, literally. Right? I want to be one of those when it's all said and done. I want to be mentioned in the same way they mention Carnegie and JP Morgan and Rockefeller, right? They want the greatest men, but they want the worst either, right? It's just kind of I don't look at myself as a savior or a nice guy or any of that. I just see that 10 years from now, I think there are a lot of people who will be really, really happy that they spend time building Africa, because everything's right. We're gonna quadruple in population by 2100. We have the youngest population. 30% of the raw commodities in the world are out of Africa. So it's only a matter of time till we stop transfer pricing and start getting real money out of what we are selling, and that will just make us richer. We talked about Turkana earlier. Turkana as a lake is has 1.5 times beachfront compared to the coast. Think about that. Why aren't people there with boats and fishing and resorts? It's because we are not there. Somebody has to create that. When I talk to people up there, they're like, oh no, tourism is the only way we're going to make money. No, Dubai figured out how to do it. I believe we're smart enough to figure out many things. My number one rule is stop listening to people. Anyone who doesn't believe in me, I'm like, you know what? Yeah. I'll see you in 10 years. Yeah. Right? So that's it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that was a really beautiful conversation.
Want to be featured on the Member Spotlight? Reach out to us via communications@asec.ke and let us tell your story.